So let's look at some things regarding law with regard to the soul in terms of how the soul is operating. This soul is governed by a hierarchy of laws. Some of the hierarchy starts with what are physical restrictions, or you could say physical capacity of the soul itself. So an example of that is if your soul is in a certain condition of love, you will not be able to, in a fairly bad condition of love, you will never be able to progress beyond the first sphere of the spirit world while that occurs. So that's the example of a physical restriction placed upon the soul because of its spiritual development. Right? So there's physical restrictions. Then there is also what we would classify as more spiritual restrictions. Now, so a spiritual restriction is what happens to the bodies when the soul is out of harmony with the law. What happens is there are spiritual restrictions that are placed upon the soul that then have physical consequences on the bodies. So the spiritual restrictions are more restrictions revolving around what you would classify as the way energy works in your body and the way energy works in your spirit body and these kind of things. So there are restrictions placed upon these functionings of your soul that then have an impact upon the energy systems that govern the bodies. And this is why we eventually get sick. This is why we have sicknesses that we can't eradicate in our body, and sometimes permanent sicknesses that result in death, like cancers and things like that. They all come from these spiritual restrictions that are upon our soul that exhibit themselves as physical restrictions in our bodies. Right? So on top of that now, there's also the highest laws are, you could say, soul-based restrictions. So I'll just... And these are very interesting types of restrictions because they affect all of these kind of emotional states of the soul. In other words, when your soul is in a certain state, it's impossible to be happy. An example of that is when if you ever visit the hells of the spirit world, you'll see they are populated by people who are extremely unhappy all the time. It's impossible for them to be happy. And the reason why it's impossible for them to be happy is because there are soul restrictions stopping them from being happy while they remain in an unloving condition. So there's all these feedback systems that are that God's designed into the law that governs your soul. And the key for us in terms of understanding our own soul is to go, okay, what are the most important things I can do to free up my soul, to make my soul have less restrictions? Right? If you want to be happy, happiness comes from having a sense of freedom to do whatever you want in harmony with love. The trouble with us is that because, as we pointed out with our senses, we're just feeding the senses with no consideration of love. So a person who's overeating is feeding the sense of taste and smell and satisfaction, a feeling in their tummy of satisfaction. They're feeding those senses with no consideration of whether it's loving to themselves or not. Right? And when we have no consideration of whether something's loving to ourselves or to others, these restrictions will be put in place upon our soul. You follow that? And these restrictions, there are many, many, by the way, of these restrictions that get placed upon the soul. If you are if you are connected to your soul, you will feel every one of them instantly. So you will do something and you'll go, restriction straight away. You'll know you've just been, the law has governed you. right? It's telling you where you're going here is going to be bad for you, right? So there's the, you could say all of that is the law-based restrictions. Right? So they are those. Now, of course, there is millions of laws, and of course that also means there's millions of potential types of restrictions that can be put upon your soul given your actions. So every single action you take that is unloving will have a restriction, and the restriction will be felt in 3 different areas of your life. It will be felt upon your physical body, it'll be felt upon your spirit body, and it will be felt upon your soul. And every time you choose to do something out of harmony with love, these restrictions will be put in place, and they will only be removed if you compensate for what you did. And what I mean by compensate is you fix what you did, or you attempt to. You have a desire to fix it. Does that make sense to everyone?